Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello, and welcome. I'm Michelle Perkins, the host of the Money and You Show. So glad to have you here. We have an exciting show for you today, a fabulous guest who's also a mentor of mine, and she is going to talk about a specific tool that's kind of a hidden secret, a gem that can help business owners to scale their businesses and to grow really effectively, and also to help career changers who want to make a new career for themselves and aren't quite sure the direction to go in. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Tracy Kawa. Tracy Faith Kawa is a trainer and success coach, sought after author, speaker, and podcaster and community advocate. In her first book, The 7 Pillars of Reinvention, Finding Your Passion and Purpose, Tracy helps you explore the right career path questions. In her second book, Faith, Hope, and Options, a Mid-Career Transitioner's Bible, Tracy shares her system for career development and identifying your calling. To support you in fast-tracking your mid-career transition, Tracy applies her experience and perfected process using the Kawa Business Assessment Tool, leading an insightful and dedicated team of coaches and implementing its proven science to benefit hundreds of professionals, entrepreneurs, and organizations. From those stepping back into the workforce to a CTO securing an additional $13.5 million in funding to entrepreneurs winning $10,000 in competition prizes, Tracy helps build clarity, confidence, and certainty, always beginning with assessing your unique professional DNA. Tracy is passionate about connecting individuals to their communities and to their calling, supporting them in climbing upon their highest vision of themselves and harnessing their God-given gifts and talents to thrive in their careers. Welcome, Tracy.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm so good because you're here, and I'm so excited that we're going to have this conversation.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting.
Well, and you are such a giver. You're such a go-giver, as the book is called, that everybody should read, actually. And I really love, ever since I met you, which was at an event a couple of years ago, you have just shown so much heart and caring in what you do, and you're so dedicated to helping people to really discover more about themselves so that they can land the best possible career and or as a business owner to really be able to be successful in their business. And you know, you and I know that you need some of these tools. You can't just necessarily wing it or dream it up out of your head. And a tool like the one that you have is so incredibly helpful as just a kickstart. And so anyway, I'm thrilled to be part of your organization in offering this tool. So I'm going to just ask you to give our audience a little background on, because this wasn't always what you did. So why don't you share a little about your own career and transition?
Oh, my own path. It was a zigzag path. Let's see. So I started out, I like to say that I started out in all things exterior, all things visual, all things aesthetic. So I started out as a makeup artist after college, during college, and then after college. Then I went, and that was with Estee Lauder. Then I went into personal training, then made a major migration to Florida. I'm sorry, skipped one. I managed a beauty salon that had 30 operators. So I was used to working with a large organization. Insofar as like a small business, like a small neighborhood business that had that many operators, that happens to be a lot. Then made the migration down here, opened up an orthodontic practice, which was a family-owned orthodontic practice, worked within that orthodontic practice, not just within, but worked inside for 3 years, but then in the community altogether, 20 years, right? So that's where I used a lot of my community building skills that I had learned in previous years and just got a chance to explore upon those and expand upon those, magnify those, and then let's see what happens. After we created this orthodontic practice, I took a step back and I said, is this really my passion? And the interesting part is that community building is my passion. However, I felt that I needed to do that on a broader scale. And even though I was grateful for the experience, I knew that the orthodontic practice itself, for me to stay there, continue on there for decades, that wasn't my truest passion. And it wasn't the highest use of my time and talent. So for me, I went into more of an exploration from that point. And what that looked like is dabbling here in real estate investing, not successful. Becoming an artist, painting children's portraits, somewhat successful, but that wasn't really going to take off. I was not going to be the next, I don't know, the next Van Gogh or, you know, I think what it boils down to is that if I would have had our tool, Michelle, like 20 years earlier, I would have been so much further ahead with what I'm doing now. Because what I'm doing now really came about by me falling into this whole, business development. People came to me and said, hey, you did such a great job building your orthodontic practice. Can you help me grow my dental business? Or can you help me grow my small office, whatever it was? And I noticed that I was always resetting the wheel and trying to figure out where to start from. And one day I just put it into the universe. I said, if I just had a tool that would help me identify what their core values were and what made them great at what they did, then that would be such a great starting point for any and every business owner who had come to me at that point. So no sooner did I put that in the universe than God dropped in my lap this amazing assessment that I worked with a behavioral scientist on, and we redeveloped it and reconfigured it into a coaching tool. And from there, it evolved. I ended up using it with career transitioners and just created this amazing, wonderful process that helps someone starting at point A. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I don't know exactly what my strengths are or where I fit in the workplace. And to use all of these tools and this process that I created to help them figure out where their ideal fit was and what they really were most wildly passionate about doing with the rest of their lives. So from there, I decided to share it, because what do you do when you create something and you can only impact like 3 people a day? What do? You share it with everyone, right? So that then they can share it and multiply your effects and multiply your impacts. So that's the point that we're at now, is getting the word out and sharing it.
Yeah, I love it. And you worked with me and we did the assessment together, and it was really revealing. And I love assessments. I'm in the career coaching business. I know about assessments. I worked in corporate. We used to be given assessments, but this one is unique, I think. And I really have found it to be super effective with people. And they just learn a lot about themselves, about, their strengths, their skills, their values, and the type of environment they're supposed to be in to be happiest. And, I think for the business owner, it's so important to know those things, because that's how you scale, is by finding and hiring other people to do those things that are really not in your zone of genius. So do you want to just talk briefly about how this assessment is unique, because it is?
It really is. And we're also talking about the limit-free life assessment. And it is unique because it's based on 7 different sciences. So a lot of tests out there are based, not all of them, but a lot of them are based on one science, the science of personality, which was from a study done in the 1950s based on airline pilots. And the way that this is unique is that the behavioral scientists combined 7 different sciences ranging from values and work at Stanford University and 20 years of research from not only Stanford but from Harvard Business School and Strength Finders and Gallup and all of these emotional intelligence, all of these amazing sciences, and combine them into one. So you would think like, oh my God, it has so much in it. It's probably, an hour long to take it. But the truth of the matter is, and the fascinating part is that it's actually only 15 minutes. Like literally, you find out exactly who you are as a business builder in 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. It's incredible. And it goes to show what a brilliant scientific mind can create, right? It goes to show when somebody like that is stepping into their gifts and talents, what can be created and put out into the universe. Yeah. Really nice.
Yeah, I love that. And I think what you do so well is then interpret it for people. And what I'm also taking on is being able to use it. So the test is pretty quick to take, but then to sit down and have really interesting conversations about what it all means is really the fun part. And so, it's wonderful.
Michelle, I want to say something about that where it gets even more fun the more of them that you start to interpret and evaluate, because what happens is at a certain point, you start getting this insight. Like there are times when I'm in the middle of interpreting someone's report and God will just lay on my heart to say to that person, did you ever think of writing? Or to say to that person, have you been looking at a particular company to work with recently? Or better yet, have you ever considered X, Y, or Z? Right. And the person is like, oh, it's so funny that you mentioned that because I have been thinking about writing a book lately, but I really, who am I? Like, there's so many great books out there. Who am I? How do I start? And that's the beginning of this conversation where you find out about this person's deeper passion. Mm-hmm. And there's just so much talent and richness out there that we get to excavate using the tools.
Yeah, I love that. And I love too what happens. Yeah, when you come up with those questions and it just lands somewhere where the person that you're talking to, it all of a sudden it's just like, oh yeah, I've just been thinking about that, or things that it's funny because we don't always share all of this. Sometimes it's just in and out of our brain and we just sort of think cool idea, but we don't do anything. We don't continue to think about it. And so this gives people an opportunity. And I think it really validates some of our feelings like, oh, I was kind of thinking that I was good at that, but I wasn't sure. And nobody's ever told me I was good at that or whatever, And so it really helps form more of an identity, which I think is so important for people. When people say, oh, I got lost, a lot of moms have that experience after they've raised kids. They feel lost. They don't know who they are. And they've lost their identity. And so this is a huge help for people understanding and appreciating their identity, because sometimes we don't necessarily appreciate our gifts and our strengths either.
I'm so glad you brought that up about the identity, because what I have found and what I wrote a lot about in my new book, Faith, Hope, and Options, a Mid-Career Transitioner's Bible, what I wrote a lot about is branding ourselves, right? Because we often don't know how to brand ourselves. And it's because we don't really see ourselves in a full 360 degrees with all our gifts and talents. And like you said, Michelle, we take a lot of what we normally do on a daily basis. We take a lot of that for granted. Mm-hmm. So if I think that, I just always organize, my son's classroom trips, or I always organize my daughter's events in her classroom, mm-hmm. right? The parties at school. Well, we don't realize, guess what? That's a great talent to have. That's organization, that's event planning. There are so many transferable skills that come out of that. Mm-hmm. And we take them all for granted. And tying that into the branding, once we know what we're really, really good at, like once we know what our gifts, because everyone's good at something, mm-hmm. like everyone has a gift or a talent, and we each have a calling. We're each called here to do something. Once we identify what our unique gifts and talents are, then it's just on. Because from there we get to explore where to apply those unique gifts and talents. And a lot of that goes into the branding. A lot of what we find out about ourselves in our assessment, and a lot of what I extrapolate from other people's brains as I speak with them, that becomes part of them, that becomes part of their brand, because you take that with you wherever you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And, I know we talk a lot in the world about what we're not doing well and what we need to work on. And so there actually isn't that much time spent focusing on our gifts and our talents and what we're really good at. And especially, I think when you get into a career transition mode, you start thinking about it, but it's much better to have that awareness as you go through your career. And to keep tapping into that. And for business owners, this show, speaking of branding, is the Money and You show. So, if anybody's out there wondering, what does this have to do with money? Well, clearly, your money-making ability, your earning potential is so much greater if you're working in, in your higher potentiality, if that's a word. And I think that is what you're helping people to do. And also for business owners, 100%, this is the key to growing your business, because as the business owner, as the entrepreneur, you have to be doing the things that really only you can do, that you do best. And there's so much else. And as business owners, we try to do all of it. And a lot of it is not in our wheelhouse. It's not what we should be spending time on. The actual cost to the business of us doing that can be pretty steep. So anyway, what would you have to say about that?
I agree with you. No, I agree 100%. I took your money assessment and I thought it was really insightful, because it got me thinking about my relationship with money and how I view money. And when you talked about going on a money date, that to me was mind blowing, because how many times did I actually sit down and have a date with my money and have just literally a session focused on, where the money is, where it's going, what it's doing, what's happening with it. And really, after speaking with you, that got me into more of a routine that way. And, it definitely segues for sure from focusing on money and focusing on our careers, and understanding as we make that money, where that money is going, what we're doing with it. Is it working for us, or is it working for someone else? Right. Mm-hmm. And then on top of it, helping us understand by assessing, like for instance, with a limit-free life assessment, helping us understand where our ideal role is. Because what happens is, there is that old saying that we receive 80% of our results from 20% of our effort. So if we know where to place our time, our energy, our talent, so that we can maybe expand that 20% to 40%, and then maybe that 40% to 60%, then that exponentially affects our return. It affects our rewards, what comes back to us. So it's so important to illuminate not only our relationship, how we see money, how we view money, but ourselves, what I like to call our unique professional DNA, so that we can see the full picture.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You're really making me think, because I just finished a couple of planning workshops, and so important as you create these plans and these goals and these strategies to make sure your role in those is where it should be. And that's another thing that this assessment can really drive home. Like, where should you be focusing, and where should you let somebody else focus?
So. Very much so. I have an interesting story that I'd like to share, if you don't mind.
Love stories.
I wrote about it in my book. And I think this is a great lesson for all emerging entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who have been in their own businesses for a while as well. I had a client who actually had an international company, one that was doing well, and he wanted to sell it. And after a conversation with him, I wasn't convinced that he was ready to leave his company. he was talking very passionately about how he enjoyed talent development and mentoring his teams. So, of course, we had him take the assessment. And after the assessment, we found out that he was really a good fit for more of a startup company than more of a corporation. And his company had evolved into a corporation. So, what we did was we encouraged him to acquire a couple of other companies or help out some young entrepreneurs. And that really gave him the excitement and the oomph that he had been looking for from his earlier days, starting out as an entrepreneur himself. And he ended up not only not selling his company, but he ended up expanding his company, which was really exciting. But what's the takeaway for every entrepreneur out there, right? The takeaway is that even people who have successful businesses don't always know the exact gifts and talents that made them successful. Sometimes they kept falling up, which is great. However, once we understand exactly what those gifts and talents are that make us as successful as we are and where our ideal place is within our own companies, then we can exponentially multiply the impact that our companies have, the growth of our company, and our satisfaction within our own company. So I urge every entrepreneur out there to get on board and take the Limit Free Life assessment and take these assessments that illuminate your blind spots, because stories like that are just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Mind-blowing, and we can learn so much from them.
I love that. I love what you said, because it is really interesting. When we're struggling in business, we tend to try to figure out why and understand what's going on. And so that's a great use of the assessment. But when we're successful, we also sometimes don't know why, and we don't take the time. We just kind of run with it. But there are very specific reasons. And yeah, I love that, just that awareness.
Yeah, case in point, Michelle, the orthodontic practice. I didn't realize that the reason why it had become so successful is because I was focused on HR and training and community relations, community building, and that's where I excelled. That's where I put most of my focus.
Yeah, yeah, I love
So
that.
now, so many years later, finding out those are exactly the skills that created that type of success in that moment at that time.
Yeah, it's really not an accident. I mean, when you're in the zone, when you're feeling good in whatever, that community building or whatever, there's a reason you're feeling so good doing that versus something else.
Yeah.
And yeah, so interesting. You brought up something about the different types of businesses, the startup versus the corporation. And this assessment helps you to understand good fit in terms of the company structure or whatever. So do you want to just kind of talk about that for a minute, what it reveals in terms of where you belong?
You know, number one, we have to take it back to values, right? Because there are a lot of companies out there that have all different types of values and all different types of target markets and audiences and niches and products and services. And, it's mind blowing. However, when we understand what our top values are, like literally what drives us in business, that's when we can understand where we would fit with another company. When we realize, hey, this company and I am speaking the same language, that's usually because there is a value fit right there. Maybe there's a culture fit, right? Because there are a lot of different types of cultures. There are a lot of different size companies. But when we understand about ourselves, and that is what the assessment reveals, it helps us understand what size company is the best fit for us. It helps us understand what type of a culture we would fit in best with. It helps us understand what our highest values are so that we recognize when someone else is talking our language.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is all the great stuff that helps us understand, in addition to understanding our own skills and talents, gifts, capabilities.
Yeah. And the beauty is there's no right or wrong here. I mean, some people are going to enjoy a startup environment because it's crazy and busy and chaotic and, nothing's figured out yet, and they're part of the group that is figuring it out. Other people would much prefer to be in a more traditional, larger corporate environment where everything is already figured out and, there's a path to follow. So, and then there's some others in between, obviously. And so I think it's really interesting to allow yourself to learn about yourself in that way, and also just to accept that this is just more enjoyable for you. And it's a good place to be, because there are a lot of people out there sort of pushing people in one direction or another. And that's just their own stuff. That's their own feelings
Right.
about where they belong. So,
Right. Their own stuff coming up
yeah.
that we impose, right, on
Yeah.
our family, our friends, our children. Oh, you should be this or that.
Mm-hmm.
To this day, my mother, says, oh, you could have gotten a job at the post office or in, the school system. And that's great, but it wasn't my calling.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that people are always going to understand what your calling is. It's not for them to understand. It's for you to understand.
Yeah.
It's for you to understand, what was meant to be for you specifically, and the gifts and talents that you were meant to use to obtain that position or that career or that milestone or that goal, that achievement. Yeah.
Yeah, and the people around you, like family or even the people you work with in a particular role, aren't necessarily going to know anything about your skills or strengths if you're not able to use them in that particular position. Or maybe they've just never even thought about them themselves. So what I love about the assessment is it's sort of an objective look at you with no baggage, no prior knowledge of you or anything, and it's really about what you know about you deep down. That's where the questions come in. The 15 minutes that you're spending answering these questions, it digs pretty deep, and you actually know the answers, but unless somebody's asking the specific questions, it just kind of doesn't come up. So.
You would never know to just, you would never know to use that language or to think
No.
that about yourself. But you raised a really interesting point a little while ago about people not really knowing your skills and talents or understanding. And I want you to know that this is especially true with entrepreneurs, because I even write about this. There's an example, there's a story in my book, Faith, Hope, and Options, Mid-Career Transitioner's Bible, where I actually had assessed a young woman, and we were talking about how their family wanted them to just get a 9-to-5 job. And they didn't really understand the life of an entrepreneur. But what was interesting was the guilt and the shame that this person had associated with being an entrepreneur. Like, who am I to wake up at 10 o'clock if I want to? Who am I to take a nap during the day, to take a break from work? Right? There was a lot of this person's own feelings that came up, believe it or not. And again, as entrepreneurs, we've got to know, like what Napoleon Hill called our definiteness of purpose, right? We've got to know our calling. We've got to know the skills, the talents, the abilities, the values that will take us to where we want to be. And one of the places where the assessment comes in so strong in this area is in the way of values, because when we understand what our unique values are, our own values, I'm not talking about everybody else's values around us, but when we understand what our own values are, we can make decisions that keep us in line with our values. So the assessment will also help us to understand our decision-making process as well as our values. So once you understand that whole entire picture, you can make decisions that are in line with your decision-making process. That's critical. Yeah. That is tremendous when it comes to making large life decisions, career decisions, decisions that'll affect our families, our futures, our families' futures, right?
Right.
So important.
It is so important, and I feel like it's so helpful to get even, whatever clarity you can get, because people do get very lost, and then you're paralyzed. You can't make decisions. So that this really is about giving you like a step ladder towards some decision making. And it's hard
Absolutely.
otherwise. And people
Absolutely.
come to both of us really just knowing, they know on one hand that something's not working. They're either unhappy in their job or their business isn't doing as well as they'd hoped or not feeling as good as they'd hoped. And so this is just so helpful, for them to have a point from to start with so that they can make better decisions. And you don't,
Yeah.
it's scary to make these decisions. People
Oh,
who
yeah.
come to both of us are in a lot of sometimes fear, sometimes worry, sometimes frustration,
Yeah.
but usually one of one of those three.
Because
Um,
these are life altering decisions.
mhm,
And
mhm,
it's about getting past the fear. It's about understanding the God given gifts and talents that you can rely on, that
yeah,
you don't have to be fearful. You don't have to worry that you're not going to make it.
yeah,
Because when you rely on what God gave you, then that's going to be your zone of purpose.
mhm,
That's going to be where you belong, where you fit in. whether
right,
whether we're talking about a career transition to a company, or whether we're talking about a pivot into entrepreneurship, or whether we're talking about taking your business to the next level, whatever, whenever we step into those gifts that God gave us, our natural innate gifts and talents, that's when we really shine. And I'm
mhm,
not saying that we don't learn as we go along. Of course, we learn, we acquire, we gather, we synergize new information
mhm,
and new learnings into who we are already. And that just makes us better. That just makes us better at decision making, better at uh, understanding where where we belong, where we fit. So important.
yeah,
Just
so important.
so
And you
important.
are training people to give this assessment to others. And I think it's been really interesting because there are some career coaches and there are some business coaches and consultants. There are also people in some more niche areas like attorneys. And, it's quite a variety of people because it can be used in so many different contexts. So I think that's really great. It has,
Yeah.
um,
It it is so um, it's so full of variety.
mhm,
Thank
yeah,
you for pointing that out.
yeah.
It truly is,
And
right?
it's
Because
fun. It's a fun thing to do these assessments and learn
yeah,
about yourself. It's not painful. It's usually quite
yeah,
interesting, and it just starts. I think so much of what we do, whether you're a coach or a consultant or whatever, is just to try to shift perspective, just to try to get people to open their minds and not see everything from, the box that they're in, and to look outside of that and find, it just generates new ideas. Um,
yeah.
which
Shifting the mindset
yeah.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
That's so important, especially like you mentioned, with attorneys or doctors or professionals who have been trained in one
Mm-hmm.
focus. This really helps to expand that mindset and see themselves from a whole new insight. Because sometimes we do get caught up in what we think are our careers, and then we're afraid to do any type of pivot or launch anything because
Mm-hmm.
we've been so successful in one direction that we feel we need to stay in that one direction and focus and zoom in on that.
Mm-hmm.
And although that can be true at times, it shouldn't stop us from being led with our heart to where our truest calling is and where we feel we can really make an impact.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for bringing up the coaches community, because I have been so blessed this year to work with, and in 2021 to work with some of the most amazing coaches, business consultants, media consultants, just such a vast, right, a broad array of people who really, the uniting aspect is that we all want to give. We all want to see people thrive. We all want to see people do well. We all want to see people rise to their highest level
Mm-hmm.
and climb upon their highest vision of themselves.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that truly unites this supportive community of heart led coaches, for sure.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful, and it gives the coaches another tool in their toolbox to really have their own impact. And so, do you want to maybe share another case study, because you've got so many, and a lot of them come up in your book, and they're so interesting. It just makes the point so much better than just discussing it. So,
I would love to share the case study about a CTO, a chief technology officer for a major brand. Like if I said the brand, you would know it. It's a household name. And this person came to me and said, I'm giving a presentation in 2 weeks, literally, like literally 2 weeks. So we've got to work fast, but I need a little bit of coaching, maybe a little bit of public speaking coaching to deliver this presentation. So everything I do starts with the assessment, even public speaking coaching. If you're writing a book, if you're delivering a speech, if you are a career transitioner, if you are an entrepreneur, whatever it is, we start with the assessment. Because once we understand ourselves, then it just boosts our clarity and our certainty and our confidence, and people notice the change. So here we started with the assessment in the case of the CTO, and we worked for 2 weeks. And every time we were working on each and every slide, we were building not only the value proposition of what she was speaking about into the presentation, we were also building in her brand and her value into the presentation. So when all was said and done, she delivered the presentation to her C-suite, and she ended up gaining an additional $13.5 million for her department in that year's budget.
wow.
It was incredible. It was amazing. If she would have come back to me and said, it went great, the presentation went wonderful, that would have been enough right there. But this on top of it was extraordinary, and it felt right. It felt good. I felt that it was very deserving, right? And it was very much needed, very much needed.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Thank you. That was a great story. And yeah, I don't think people always would think about building their own value and their brand into something like this. But when you do that, that's where some of the passion comes through in the presentation too. So yeah,
I agree.
that was great advice, and such a help to have that assessment to basically give you points that you could share.
Yeah, it just gave this person a jump start.
Yeah.
It just gave them a jump start. Like instead of starting at 0, they were starting at like 85.
Mm-hmm.
And then the only way is up from there.
Right. And if you're writing your bio, if you're doing your LinkedIn, if you're doing a resume, I mean, all of these things really need that input, and will be better for having done something like this that can help
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
Yeah. I think what's really interesting is, we know ourselves, and a lot of people will come and say, I know my skills, I know my strengths. And I think that attitude of I already know it can really be a barrier. So
Right.
really good to have that kind of beginner's mind and say, you know what, I think I know a lot about me, but let me just see if there's something that I could still learn. And
There's always more to learn about
there's always more to
ourselves.
learn. Yeah.
Always more to learn about ourselves.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. So Tracy, what else would you like to share about what you do, about the assessment, your book coming out? I'm super excited about your book, and your book, it could not be more timely. I mean,
Yeah.
as everyone out there is leaving jobs and reinventing, it's just, I don't even necessarily know that you intended for this timing, but boy, is it perfect.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, there's no bad time for a career book, but
True.
yeah, this timing is really fantastic. And what do I want to share? I guess just the fact that there's so much to explore out there. And I think as individuals, we kind of get caught up in thinking in a linear fashion and not really looking at all the options and not looking at the art of choice that we have, not cultivating the art of choice. Right. And there's a certain amount of faith that goes along because each of us is unique. I'm here, you're here, right? Each person who is alive on earth has a certain set of characteristics, and God made each of us for a reason. So there have got to be some skills that come along with this great unique package that he made. So I believe that people would be remiss not to explore what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. That's a great point. And I think, yeah, we should all do our own work in that regard. And not only does it help us, but it helps everybody. It helps our employer. It helps our customers if we're a business owner. So it's all really in service to us and the world.
And I think it's about reclaiming that art of choice, right? I mean, it's like a kid being in a candy store, looking at all the different choices. I mean, how would we feel if all of those different pieces of candy in front of us were actually job positions or job options? It would be elating to know that we have the power. So it's all about reclaiming that power to step forward, to be fearless in our careers, knowing that we each have a calling, knowing that there's a zone of purpose, knowing that there are action steps that we can take to push us further along, whether it's opening up our own business or vying for that promotion or changing to a different company because this one in particular is not recognizing us in the way that we feel we deserve. There's always a ladder to climb wherever we are, right? There's so many people that say like, oh, I'm just in a rut. Or if I had $1 for every client that said to me, I never had to go looking for a job. I've always been recruited. I mean, I have heard, that is the number one line that I've heard over and over again. And when we have the odds stacked in our favor, or when we stack the odds in our favor by really doing some of the work that it takes to figure out where our strengths lie and what our values are and what our best fit is, then we have more options and we have more opportunities. And that's what Faith, Hope, and Options, a mid-career transitioner's Bible, is about.
I love that. And I love that you're here because that's so aligned with the idea of a limit-free life. When you had that description of the candy store and being able to choose what you want, that's exactly what we're after, more choice. And whether that's having enough money to not worry about money so that you can be freer to make those choices, or to be more empowered by knowing more about yourself and what you care about and where your interests are and all of that, so that you can choose well. It really is all about choices and decision making and feeling free in that. So
choices, options, feeling free, absolutely. And having your money work for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And knowing how to manage it well. Knowing how you view money.
Yeah, and I'm thrilled to hear that you went on money dates and that you're still dating your money. That makes me really happy.
I'm taking it out for Valentine's Day.
Good. I'm so happy. That's excellent. It'll take you out as well.
Oh, there you
go. It works that way. Yeah.
Better.
Well, Tracy, thank you so much for being here. I love talking to you. I always have ever since we met. We've just we immediately clicked, and I love what you do, and I know that you do it from the heart, and you really care about just what you said, getting this out, sharing it with more people, because it'll have a big impact and people will benefit from it. So that you're living your purpose. You really are a role model and an inspiration. Can you tell people how they can connect with you?
Yeah. You can find me on my website at Kawa Community Partners. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So just look me up under Tracy Kawa. You could see my name below there on the screen. Thank you. And you can also find me on Facebook or Instagram, just any of the social medias.
Yeah.
I look forward to connecting.
Well, you do post wonderful things on LinkedIn, and if people would like to take, if you're curious and you want to take the Limit Free Life assessment, you can contact Tracy or me at Michelle at limitfreelife.com, or you can go to my website limitfreelife.com and set up a strategy call with me. But we can certainly make that happen, and I think you'll be very, very happy that you did.
Absolutely.
Um,
And
yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
that any entrepreneur would be remiss if they didn't take the Limit Free Life assessment. Truly,
Yeah.
truly.
Thank you, Tracy. I agree. I think you're doing yourself a huge favor by doing it and missing out if you don't. So we can make that easy for you. And Tracy, I just want to thank you again for coming on. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you so much. I look forward to your book
Thank you,
coming out. We'll
Michelle.
make sure we get everybody, that information when it's ready. And
Yeah. I
yeah,
love speaking with you. Thank you so much. And you know what I think it is also, Michelle, just real quick, I think we share values
yeah.
because I felt that connection the first time after the event that you and I both spoke at. So thank you again for having me on Money and You. This is a great show and I listen to it all the time. I love it. And just thank you again.
Thanks, Tracy. Okay. Well, audience, thank you. Thank you for being here. We love having you here at the Money and You Show. And you can find us on all the podcast platforms, as well as the Limit Free Life YouTube channel, Limit Free Life Facebook page. And we look forward every week to bringing you fabulous guests like we did today with Tracy. And any questions that you have, any topics you're interested in, please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Love to get feedback on the show. Love for you to subscribe to the show and leave me a review. We can bring more of these great shows to you every week from ubngo.com. But the feedback would really help us. And so that would be great. And of course, the subscribes and the reviews. So thank you. And we will see you next week on the Money and You Show.